Hi, this is Terry. I'm Terry Flint, and this is number 4 of Let's Be Resilient Together, sponsored by TOSH Pilates. Today we're going to talk about another key component of being resilient, and one that a lot of us struggle with believing that we deserve or that we're worth it, and that is doing self-care. Now, I define self-care as the time and attention that we give ourselves in order to be our best selves. So it's that very foundation that we have to have in order to have a good day, to be able to do and take care of all of the responsibilities that each of us carry. It's interesting that as I've taught this concept for a lot of years, two barriers always seem to come up as to why we don't do self-care. The first is that we're so busy taking care of other people that taking time out for ourselves seems selfish. And that's so often associated with doing self-care. If I do self-care, that means I'm selfish. And another interesting barrier to self-care is more recent in kind of the crazy lives we have. And Brene Brown, I think, described it really well. She says it takes courage to say yes to rest and play. And I would insert, it takes courage to do self-care in a culture where exhaustion is seen as a status symbol. I think that's so interesting. That indeed, if you say, oh, I'm well rested, I've taken good care of myself, that's why I feel good and can do all of these projects, people will look at you and like you are nuts, because it's so much more common, almost socially acceptable to say, oh my gosh, I'm so busy, I have no time to take care of myself. Those are not very good reasons to not do self-care. And as a long-term therapist and as a human being and as a woman, I can tell you that I see self-care very different. In as much as, to me, it's the fuel that we put in our tanks, in our car tanks, in order to be able to drive and do anything that we desire to do. If you think about self-care as fuel, then you'll realize that, okay, wait, you really can't go without filling up. So self-care isn't the polish on the car. It's not manicures or the spa or anything else that you think is self-indulgent. That's not what we mean when we talk about self-care. We're talking about what are the basic things that you need to do each day, each week, maybe each month, in order to have a chance at being your best self. And it's really kind of the minimum that if you don't do, you know what happens when you run out of fuel. And that happens to a lot of people. They run out of fuel, so they're on the side of the road, and that can look like anxiety, depression, illness. It actually does lower our immune system, so we're more likely to get bugs. And so you can see that when you look at it that way, it's really not optional. In fact, I say self-care is mandatory, not optional at all. Now, what I also have known or learned about self-care is that we each have a unique way or our own formula or recipe that it takes to fill our fuel tank. I can't define for you what will fill your fuel tank, although I remember as a young social worker trying to do that. But I've really realized that we each have our own unique recipe. So when I encourage people, and here's the activity that I have them do. What are the 5 things that you need to do each week or each day in order to even have a chance to be your best self? Meaning, what is it you have to do in order to put fuel in your fuel tank? You know, what's required? Now, as you think about that, it'll have a lot of variation. I know right now, I think it's really funny that we're seeing differences between introverts and extroverts. Introverts are handling this kind of being safe at home pretty well because they like being by themselves and doing things quietly. They get energy by doing that. Whereas we can see extroverts are really having a hard time. They're needing the people. And so that will affect your list. What is it you would put on your list? At the same time, what we need may depend on our time in life. I know self-care for a mom of 5 children right now looks pretty different than self-care for me, who doesn't have those children or those demands, actually of even a job right now. And it just depends on our personality. So consider this. Okay, so what would be on your list of things you absolutely have to have? What 5 things help you have a better day? I hope you'll take some time to think that. Now, one thing that's always been on the top of my list forever has been enough sleep. That actually is probably just as essential for me as food and water. I have to have sufficient sleep. And I share that as an example because to get that self-care, I've had to make adjustments in my life in order to be able to get that. I have to go to bed early, and I don't stay up late watching movies or other kind of shows. But if I don't get that, I have such a hard time the next day. Other things on lists that have been pretty common are time to be by themselves, maybe time to read, time to early in the morning to meditate or plan the day. It can range. Whatever you need, you want to be sure you put on that list and identify that. Now, this is also a great exercise to then share with the people in your house, because once they hear what you need on your list and you hear what's on their list, then we support one another in being sure that those needs get met so we can come back together and fulfill all of the other demands and responsibilities that we have. That's a really fun thing to know. So if your partner needs time to go exercise, you're saying, hey, you need to get out there and exercise because I know you're so much better when you come back after you've been exercising. A lot of people over the years have said, well, I just don't have time. It's impossible. And as we discuss self-care, they'll use the yes, but that won't happen. Yes, that's good for you, but it's not going to happen for me. And as I tried to talk them into it or give them suggestions on how to problem solve, what I really recognized is that they didn't accept the premise that they need self-care. Because once you know that, you can be incredibly creative and amazing in making sure that it happens. And so I want you to consider or do a little bit of experimenting that maybe if you need sleep, get the sleep and then see how you feel the next day. Or then don't get the sleep and see how you feel. Start making connections between when you have fuel in your fuel tank and when you don't. See if that might convince you that getting that sleep or that physical activity or whatever's on your list is really worth doing because you're a better person when you've done it. Another way of checking on that is ask your family, when am I my best self? When am I able to be the best with you? I think they too will begin to recognize, oh yeah, it's when mom went out and got her walk, or it's when mom had a few minutes of quiet time in her bedroom. They then will be more supportive and being sure that you've gotten what you need. It reminds me actually of the Snicker bar commercial, right? When the person's in the back seat really being ornery and crazy and they say, you need a Snickers, and they give him a Snickers bar, and then they're transformed back into being a really nice person. Well, self-care is our Snickers bar. We need that in order to be our very best self. One more reason to do self-care is, and this is for all of you mothers, who believe you don't have time, do you really want to raise your children having them see that self-care is just optional? Do you want them to grow up feeling the way that you felt sometimes, that you don't deserve self-care, or that it really is just icing on the cake instead of really being the flour in the cake? I want you to consider that, because I think showing and role modeling our children and others that self-care is so critical to being resilient and happy and healthy, that you'll have the courage to do more of it and to begin to put it into your life. Not right just now, but that too is something that you'll take with you going forward. Let me just end with a favorite quote by Katie Reed, and it's worth considering this quote. Self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. Hopefully you'll take some time, identify your self-care, and practice and experiment finding ways to put it into your life, not only for today, but in the future. By the way, if you have comments or questions or have suggestions, this is a new thing for us, for me, you can put them on the comment section of YouTube, or you can email us at TOSH, T-O-S-H, Pilates, Pilates, @imail.org. Bye.